Hi, everyone. It's Family Fridays. Welcome back. I'm Rachel Poisky. I'm a Duchenne mom and a co-coordinator for South Texas PPMD Connect groups. And today we are tackling uh, anxiety and coping strategies during quarantine. I think we're on day 450 of quarantine. I've lost count. But I'm sure that for some of us, the anxiety is high. And, for Duchenne families, I think on a good day, we still struggle with anxiety in our house, either parents or the kids. We know that that is a common struggle for Duchenne kids. So, I've always said that the physical stuff is challenging, but sometimes the behavior stuff is even more challenging and the emotional components of Duchenne. So we're going to talk about that today and just some practical things we can do, just some practical tips. I have with me today two experts by experience. I have Dawn Retzkala. She is a parent and also is a CFO for Cisco Foods. And she is a parent of Alex, who has Duchenne, and she's going to be sharing with us. And then we also have Ben Dupree, who is an individual with Duchenne, and he is a PAC member. So he's on our advisory committee for a parent project and has been a great voice in the Duchenne community and has mentored a lot of younger guys and things like that. And he is currently getting his master's in social work at University of Texas in Arlington. So they're just going to share with us a little bit of what's working in their houses and their homes and their lives. And we're going to start with Dawn and just ask her to give us some of her best tips for coping in this time of quarantine.
Sure.
Dawn.
Hi, everybody, and thanks, Rachel. We are a family of a Duchenne boy named Alex. He's 8 years old, but he would tell you he's going to be 9 in 2 weeks. That's very important to know. We have had our diagnosis since 2015. So, September 2015 is when we received that diagnosis. Alex was between 4 and 5 years old at the time. For us, as Rachel mentioned, our journey so far has been really riddled with a lot of behavior and anxiety. And as a family, that tends to be what we focus on more than the muscles, quite frankly, at this point with Alex and his age. So for us, we've spent the last 2 years, and probably feels like 20, on a personal journey to figure out stress and anxiety in general with Alex. We've tried probably anything and everything. And I certainly sympathize with a lot of the Facebook posts that I see out there on the different Duchenne Facebook pages. So for us, stress and anxiety, as Rachel mentioned, is a common day occurrence. And then with quarantine, it becomes even more because now not only is Alex stressed and anxious, but we are too. So we have to figure out how to live with it all together. With Alex, his peculiarities tend to be that he has a lot of high energy. He was originally diagnosed with ADHD before we figured out that it's really what we call Duchenne brain in our family. And I know that Natalie Truba or Dr. Truba has spent some time talking about that. But until we really realized that a lot of his behavior related issues were really focused more around anxiety and stress, it took us a while to figure it out. So now that we know that and we're in a little bit of a better place as a family with that, with quarantine, it took us probably like everybody else the first week to figure out everything. We're both working full time from home, my husband and I, with Alex's older sister, who's 12, and he with us. Our school system is figuring out homeschooling. We're figuring out how to do work calls with kids running around in the background and everything. So once we all got through that in the first week, we came up with some solutions that really kind of work for Alex, and hopefully you guys would find some of these might work for you. So with a kiddo like him who still is able to be mobile and still has a lot of high energy, we found that small things and small doses tend to work best. So when we were trying homeschooling initially, he wanted to sit down for a couple hours straight and kind of pound through all of the assignments that the teachers were putting out there. But we could see him getting anxious and a little stressed when he would come across something in the assignment that didn't work. So we cleared off everything that kind of is normal in our room, and we're now using our dining table, which is pretty long. It seats about 8 people. We've cleared it off and we've created it as our station table. So, what we've done around the dining table is we've created individual stations for anybody really in the family. We do some of the stations with the kids, but we have one section of the table that's coloring and art and crafts. We have one section of the table that's puzzles. We have one section of the table that's games, and there's a whole selection of games you can choose from. And then we have one section of the table that's been the most popular with all of the people in our family, which is Lego building. And so I can't even tell you the number of Lego sets we've put together in the last 4 weeks, but probably over 20 different individual Lego sets that all of us have created, mostly them and not me. But I think that, just having small things for him to take a break and do periodically when you can kind of see those stressors coming on has been really successful for us. And then trying to create some sense of normalcy in life as much as you can. So, trying to think about activities we would normally do as a family that would help with that energy burn that's so important in our kids. Unfortunately, we know they can't do some activities, but, so we thought of, well, we used to go to the movies as a family, and we don't know when we'll be able to go back to the movies again as a family. So, we've dedicated or tried to dedicate one night a week to family movie night. So we kind of do a dine in, make popcorn, create our own movie that night as a family. And then our family in particular really likes music. And Alex, when he grows up, wants to be a DJ. So we try to find ways to incorporate music or things that he would normally do. So thankfully, our neighbors are all very understanding. They know us and they know Alex. So when it was warm out, we live in Columbus, Ohio. So we have not, unfortunately, had the best weather during the quarantine, but we did get a couple really warm days about a week ago. We took Alex's DJ speaker outside and we started blasting music through our neighborhood, and we created a little neighborhood dance party off of our back patio. And sometimes when the weather hasn't been that great, I'm sure a lot of you have been on social media more than we might want to admit through the quarantine, but there's been a lot of celebrity concerts that have been hosted live, whether it's an individual artist or groups of artists getting together. And we call that our concert night. So we kind of look out for those and we pick the artists that we like and enjoy. And we have family concert nights where we spread out blankets on the lawn and we have kind of a family concert night going. And then, I think the biggest struggle for us, and I'm sure for everybody, has been trying to figure out those outdoor activities. So, as I mentioned, the weather hasn't been really cooperative. Alex is pretty good physically. He's actually an Exondys 51 kiddo. So he's been on exon skipping therapy since he was 4.5, 5. So he's been on it for a while. So he's in okay physical shape and but still limited like everybody else. And so it's the most difficult part for us from a stress and anxiety standpoint during quarantine has been Alex seeing all of his neighbor friends who happen to be a lot of boys his age outside doing things that he can't do. And so that's really been the one that's been the trickiest for us to figure out. And we found a little success, not a lot. This is still a struggle for us. But we found a little success in getting him on electronic kind of, I'll call them little kid toys, but for him, he could still play with them. So there's something out there that I see other parents are aware of when I look at Facebook from time to time called the Wild Thing. And Alex is a wild thing himself. So the two things fit together very nicely. But it's basically kind of, I don't know how I describe it, like an ATV scooter type thing that he can sit in. It's electronic and he can move. So when those other neighbor kids are outside riding their bikes and Alex gets frustrated that he can't do it, he now has this thing that he can get on and he can go ride if he wanted to as well. Social distancing is something we're keeping really strict in our family. So it's part of the challenge is just he wants to play with other kids and we can't solve that problem, but trying to get him mobile in a way that we can do as a family probably is still something that we're working on. But we found this wild thing and using a manual wheelchair that we push him in when we go on walks as a family sometimes. those have been a few things that have been successful. But I'm looking forward to this conversation. Really excited that I was invited to join, and hopefully, maybe I'll learn a few tips and tricks from the other families out there. So, thanks, Rachel.
Thanks. Thanks, Dawn. Those are some really just good practical things to think through. So I want you all definitely to share in the comments section your tips, what's working. We can always learn from each other, and we need to do that. So please share your tips and also your questions that you may have for Dawn or Ben once he's coming up. I think Ben is going to share some great things just that may be helpful for some of you that have some older boys and kind of from their perspective. So you may want to drag them in to listen to Ben or let them watch later. But please start sending your questions and comments of things that's working for you. And now I just want to invite Ben to share a little bit.
Okay. So, yeah, like many of us, I think I've found this whole new normal that we live in to be kind of stressful and anxiety provoking, just in that, like, suddenly the world is very different from what it was like a month ago. And on top of normal stress and anxiety, there's just this, how do I adapt to this new situation, and how do I stay connected with people and avoid feeling kind of lonely or isolated? And for me, I kind of found a few different things that have kind of helped me through this. Like uh, some of the more basic things of, like, I had a morning routine before all of this started, and I've tried really hard to keep that morning routine going into this. Just that it's really easy to kind of let go of that when you're at home a lot more, but I found that sticking to that has kind of helped me feel normal a little bit, and so that I don't kind of, I guess I don't really realize how abnormal the situation is as long as I keep doing those things I did every day, um, going through it. Also, I've kind of found that keeping myself maybe busy doing things other than watching TV or playing video games, of like, um, for me, I have, I'm in an internship, so I've been kind of putting a lot of effort and work into that, and kind of spending my energy on that. But even something as simple as, like, looking up something you'd never like learned about but were interested in, kind of spending a little bit of time, like, reading, or I don't know, doing something with your hands, like building Legos, or like trying to do some sort of activity that gets you away from the screen for a little bit. Um, because I found that, at least for me, when I spend too much time doing that, I get kind of, I kind of feel kind of slow or tired, and um, it kind of brings back a lot of that um, anxiety and stress when I start feeling kind of blah, or not, or just kind of feeling that lack of motivation. Um, and I think one thing that I've kind of found myself having to do is not listen to the news as much, because I'd been kind of following everything, and it just got to the point where, like, if I thought about that all the time, I got more and more stressed, and just decided that kind of I should kind of back off a little bit and try to at least kind of be aware of what um, is being done, but not kind of follow every little thing that's happening, and not keep the news on all day. And then to kind of stay connected with friends and kind of not feel as lonely and not feel as isolated, I've kind of been trying to do some things online with friends, like, um, I like board games a lot, and there's a game that I've been playing that's called Tabletop Simulator that you put on a computer and it allows you to kind of simulate a board game. And they have a lot of them on there that it's like a thing where people make games, like custom versions of things. Like, so there's like Uno and things like that on there. And so me and my friends would kind of schedule a time and just have a board game night and play board games. Um, Another thing that I've kind of done along those lines is there's like a set of games called like Jackbox games that are kind of party games that have different things like drawing pictures or coming up with witty catchphrases and things like that. And those are a fun way to stay connected. One thing though is that on those, some of them aren't as family friendly as other games, but they do, I think, have like a family friendly option that you can select if you're worried about some of the content in those games. So I've kind of just been trying hard to keep my routine as normal as possible, kind of stay busy when like stay productive and stay busy when I'm at home, and then trying to make sure that I'm at least connecting with my friends somehow. And I think those three things have kind of really been have really been what has helped me kind of manage my stress and anxiety and keep it at kind of a normal level.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Ben, for sharing all that. And you know what I hear, I think from Dawn and Ben both are two main things: staying connected and having fun. And I think sometimes in this we can just kind of get wrapped up in the survival mode of it. But I think it's so important for our boys to just have some fun and their siblings and to stay connected. So please start to send your questions in if you have anything for Dawn or Ben. I wanted to start with just a couple things. This question is for Dawn. I know in my house that sometimes the anxiety when it kicks in uh, for my son, it leads to anger, and that's how it's kind of manifest is I'll find when he's angry, I'm like, what are you stressed about? So I just want your experience with that. And I know it's kind of like this rocket ship of anger that takes off and it's
Yeah.
hard to get it back down. So I'd love for you to share just what are some techniques you've experienced in dealing with the anger anxiety kind of coupled together.
Yeah, Rachel, our experience sounds very similar to yours. Is that if we don't intercede and get ahead of those warning cues that I've learned, so I feel like I am operating my own brain at all times, and I'm also kind of operating Alex's brain on a lot of days. And what I mean by that is I'm operating as that frontal lobe, that brain ability that he doesn't have to recognize what those stressor cues are quite yet. And that's something we've been working on a lot. So we actually finally connected with psychologist Dr. Natalie Truba and a psychiatrist at Nationwide Children's Hospital close to where we live. And through that, we've learned some techniques. So some of them come naturally, just as parents, we know our kids the best. And other things we've just had to learn from doctors. So when Alex can't, when no one is around him that knows what these cues are, and if left for a period of time for him to kind of build and bubble, in our situation, it does explode as you described, and it's a pretty severe explosion sometimes. We've been able to get ahead of that a lot, and so our experience is that as a family, we know what his ticks are, like we all know ourselves, and we know things that frustrate him, and we know hopefully most of the time when it's going to happen, so we can anticipate it. But even, we still experience that today. So, Legos are kind of his thing right now that he's gotten into. And he will oftentimes put a couple pieces together that maybe he messed up and the piece needs to go 2 slots over, or he put the wrong size piece together. And now, if you know Legos, those Lego pieces are stuck together. And if you know how they stick together, and they're very difficult to get apart, and difficult to get apart when you don't have the ability to do that as easily as some of us. And so we've had our Lego explosions over the last couple of weeks where we've had to kind of get involved and kind of help him. But our experience with it has been a combination of behavior therapy. We do have him on an anti-anxiety medication, a very low dose of Zoloft that has made him a different kiddo, for the good. And then we just kind of have to constantly kind of watch him and act like that frontal lobe. I will say, though, encouraging for parents, anyone out there with young kids, maybe even younger than Alex, that is relating to this, is that our dark period with the behavior stuff came over the last couple years, partly because Alex wasn't really able to converse about it, and we weren't as familiar with everything that was going to lead to those explosions. But now that we're more familiar with it and we have a medical team around us to help, life has gotten better. So during quarantine, we find that there are stressors that are new to us, because I think he's just sometimes stressed and anxious in general. So it's really, unfortunately, just something that we're constantly manually managing with him. But we think that we've kind of gotten to a place where we're able to do it on most days. Doesn't mean we don't have tough days. We certainly have those. The most difficult part, I think, is, with the muscle side of Duchenne, you kind of know what a path might look like, generally speaking. With the behavior side of Duchenne, it's literally a day-to-day, hour-to-hour situation sometimes. And you don't know when those explosions are going to happen or what they might look like. And then the tough part is it kind of impacts the whole family. So, when he gets upset and has those really angry situations, then I get upset. Then my husband gets upset. Then my daughter's upset. And so it's a day-to-day thing with Duchenne that we find very difficult to manage.
Thank you, Dawn. I think that's a common experience in the Duchenne world. So thank you for sharing that, because that I know that rings true, and it's going to ring true for a lot of people watching this. And I love the part where you're saying about trying to get ahead of it, which you can't always,
Yeah.
but using some techniques and cues. And one thing I know we found in our family, and Ben, I know, has experienced this as well, is just making sure the hunger is under control, that there isn't the hangry, and that we're doing some protein every couple of hours, just to kind of help keep that blood sugar stabilized. So, Ben, can you just share a little bit about what we were talking about the other day, just how you feel that manifest in your life and kind of what you've been doing with that?
Yeah. So, uh, I like when I'm hungry, I get kind of angry and I'm more irritable, and things kind of stress me out and make me more anxious than they would normally. And so, kind of, I found that it's really important to like recognize first if I'm not feeling good, like if something is stressing me out or if I feel anxious, I think like first, have I eaten? And for me, it's kind of sometimes that is it, and I can fix my anxiety and stress just by eating, because I maybe gotten my schedule slightly off or something and forgot to eat when I should have. Um, and so I think that kind of goes to a lot of things. If there's kind of things that make you anxious or make someone anxious, kind of trying to manage those things those anxieties and stressors that kind of how to manage first, because sometimes that's all it is, and there isn't this extra stuff about what's going on with everything else. Um, so yeah, I've kind of just tried to stay aware of kind of that.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think that's helpful that you've been able to kind of get that cue in your in your own life, and something that we as parents can try to help our boys kind of sense that, like when you're feeling hungry, maybe you need to um, that's always my first go-to when I can see kind of the rocket getting ready to take off with my son. I say, okay, let's try something to eat and then see if that can get us to a better place. Something else, Dawn, I wanted to ask you, and I'll share one thing we've been doing, but just any sort of mindfulness sort of techniques or anything like that, if you have those. One that we use in our house that has been helpful is just kind of grounding with the five senses. So just to stop when you're in the moment and say, okay, what are five things I can see? What are four things I can touch? What are three things I can hear? Two things I can I forgot taste. Right, I'm losing, but you go through all the senses. It doesn't have to be with
Mhm.
each of those. But so Dawn, I would just love for you to say, I know that mindfulness technique has helped a little bit just to stop and try to use all the senses and get grounded and get distracted. But is there any mindful techniques you've used?
Yeah, we don't do all of the senses, but the big one that we're focused on right now is breathing. And so, again, Dr. Truba's taught us that this is a physiological thing. And so, with the elevated heart rate and lung rate at a normal state, and then when we get into that angry state, it's really elevated. And so, the mindfulness that we do with Alex probably isn't as much of a technique as just something that has kind of helped him. So, it's interesting. If anyone's read the book, The Five Languages of Love or The Love Languages, one of them is physical touch. And even when Alex was a baby, he had a hard time getting put to bed at night without being rocked first. And his go to, anytime he is struggling, he's a more sensitive person by nature, is to touch. So he wants to snuggle on the couch, he wants to snuggle in bed, he wants a hug, he wants to hold your hand, some sort of touch contact. And we found that we can get him to remember that's his soothing technique when he's starting that, stressful anxiety moment. That will also help get ahead of it. So, sometimes when we're in those moments, even ourselves as adults, we don't want to hear someone tell us anything. We're just angry, right? We're just frustrated. We're just angry. We don't need to hear our spouse or anybody else tell us what we're thinking or feeling. We just need somebody there. And so the mindfulness we do with Alex is if he's starting down that path and we can't stop him verbally, we just go over and give him a hug. And we kind of hold him pretty tight. It's almost toddler like, but we just hold him and we say, let's just breathe together. And so it's kind of that touch with him and us breathing and doing like the 5 deep breaths and slowing him down and kind of getting him to a place where you can just talk to him. And we found that if we remove him from the situation, as much as that aggravates him initially and kind of makes it worse, getting him away from the situation helps calm as well. So we try to go to a quiet place in the house, usually his bedroom or a different room. We do like kind of a tight hug and we just sit there together and breathe. And so that's been a technique that works for us. We probably aren't as able to go through the five senses with him quite yet. So over the last year, we've just really been trying to get him to calm himself with breathing because we figure he can do that anywhere quietly himself if he had to.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think breathing's another great mindfulness technique that we've used a lot. Ben, do you have anything that kind of is your go-to to kind of physically ground you when you're just sensing that stress coming up?
Um, just sitting outside. A lot of like I notice that I forget to just do that, and sometimes I just need to step away from what I'm doing and get outside and just like sit in the backyard,
Mm.
like just get some fresh air, kind of take myself out of the situation, and I just come back later.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I think that's something, and that kind of leads to my next question. For our boys, some of them do struggle with attention issues and some other kind of things. They're not able to go run it off, right, or run off their stress, run around the block. With maybe with some of our siblings who are struggling with some anxiety and stress, we can say, "Go take a run around the block. You'll feel so much better." And we don't have that. And I know even for us, we can't access aqua therapy right now like we normally do, or go to a pool. We don't have a pool at home, so a pool to go to. And so the boys, I think, are not able to get as much sensory output to be able to kind of get rid of some of that energy, which I think contributes a little bit to their anxiety. So I don't know, Dawn, if there's anything you've kind of felt like this has just helped from a sensory standpoint for them, just to be able to kind of get a little bit of energy out somehow.
Yeah, I think I mentioned music is big in our house. So we actually do dance parties. And I know a lot of other families have posted that kind of stuff on Facebook before. So to kind of get those wiggles out and burn that energy, especially when we're all kind of shelter in place right now, we do dance parties. So we happened to purchase, gosh, this was years ago, when Alex was kind of first getting into music, a really cheap disco ball that you just put on a stand and plug in. So we'll do a disco ball dance parties sometimes to get that energy burnout. One thing that was successful at school for him when he was losing his attention, and I've actually been thinking about how I could incorporate it here in the house, is walks. So, again, I know that's a sensitive topic for some of our boys, but for those boys who are younger that can still um, get up and move a little bit, the way they did it at school was kind of cool. They had very different kind of areas of the building, and they had done things on the wall, big posters on the wall that would kind of say, let's take a break and do an activity. And that one might have been, let's do 3 yoga poses, and then another station in the school might have been something else. And so what they did is they were able to adapt it for Alex physically so that he could do some things. But I heard Ben say it, and I know it's really important in our family, is kind of getting away from the situation, and that even kind of comes into play when you're trying to kind of get that energy burnout too, is trying to find a different place or a different thing to do. So that is, as I mentioned, one thing we're struggling with, even with a kiddo who's still a bit mobile, is gosh, it's really hard to burn off that energy.
Okay, that's helpful. One kind of thing I wanted to maybe is move toward as we're moving toward wrapping up. We have all these techniques, and they can work and they can be helpful. But sometimes as families, we just kind of are in deeper than that, and we need some professional help. We need to take our kids to be evaluated, and maybe just have some other people on our team that are mental health professionals. So I would love to hear from Dawn and then Ben, uh, kind of what are some mental health professionals maybe you've had on your team to help you when kind of you need more help than just some of the techniques we've talked about today. So I'll start with Dawn.
Sure. We are not shy about seeking medical help. And, trying to manage this Duchenne brain just became really, really overwhelming for us as a family. It was taking control of our whole family and really changing the family dynamic. So we started talking about it in our clinic visits with the doctors there, and once we saw kind of this awareness and learned this was associated with Duchenne early in our diagnosis, we went and sought help. And so we started seeing a psychiatrist a while ago. We had a clinical diagnosis done, like a full behavior diagnosis done that included IQ and all kinds of stuff. And we initially were diagnosed as ADHD, but then later learned that it was really more anxiety than anything else. So we rely on our team, our whole medical team, which includes a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And I'll touch on the subject of the drug side of it, and that's first let me say it's a complete personal choice for everyone. So I'm not advocating for anything specific at all, but it is sharing our personal journey. When we got that ADHD diagnosis, we went down the path of being prescribed at our choice some ADHD well-known medication. And it just was not doing anything for us. And we were seeing some negative outcomes from it or no positives. We just weren't seeing what we had hoped with, which would be some improvement. And so we actually talked to and finally were connected with Dr. Truba and started learning it was more of a physiological thing in the body than really something that's characteristic of the ADHD. And we went off all the medication and started treating it and associating the outbursts with the cause. And so we were always focused on the outbursts themselves when really we needed to be focused on what was creating that and what was leading to that. And once we started associating the two together, we as parents, even untrained medical professionals, could tell that it was anxiety that was creating these outbursts. They were happening during certain times in school every day. They were happening in big social situations. They were happening on the playground, in the lunchroom, areas where we knew it was probably social pressure or frustration that was causing some of this. And so we are now on a very low dose of Zoloft, and that is the only behavior-related medication, you could call it, that Alex takes. And our personal journey is that he is a different kiddo with this medication. And as I shared before, we have our days and we have our moments. Our expectation is not that we will solve this completely. We were just looking for something that would make it manageable and allow us to be a family, allow us to go eat at a restaurant without an outburst, allow us to go to a birthday party without an outburst, kind of work through what we would want him to have, which is a relatively normal childhood experience. So personally for us, we've spent 2.5, almost 3 years trying to work this out. And I'll say, knock on wood, right now we're in a good place. But like with everyone, I'm expecting that we'll evolve and go through different stages of this as Alex grows.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Ben, do you have something just to add about maybe some mental health professionals that have been on your team through the years?
Yeah. So, kind of the last, I think, 8 or 9 years, I've been seeing a counselor to kind of work through a lot of different things. Most of what I do with them is just kind of talk through the issues that are bothering me or kind of what I've been thinking and kind of maybe look at those and see if like what part of it is just me thinking things are a certain way when they maybe aren't, and kind of just having another perspective on what I've been feeling, and having a perspective that's outside of the situation, like outside of the family, someone that's kind of disconnected from all the stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis, because I think it can be kind of hard to share some things with the people you're around all the time, and having kind of someone outside the situation is like to share things with can help and it's helped me um, kind of now dealing with this, just that um, I can talk to someone outside about kind of what's going on, and kind of maybe through talking through it, I feel a little bit less anxious. And kind of I've switched to doing that kind of remotely, in that like we just FaceTime and have our appointments that way. And that's kind of been important, I feel, to keep going through, like to keep that um those appointments even while things are kind of up in the air, because it's just been so beneficial for me over the like years to have that.
Mhm. That's great. Thank you for sharing that, Ben. And I think you're right about, maybe harder to do telehealth right now, but I think for us, what's been helpful in doing that is even for the therapist to see us in our own environment. That's kind of something they don't get to do in the same way. So that's helpful, I think. But those are just, thank you both for being open and sharing about that. That sometimes you do need to reach outside and seek some help with your family and with what's happening. And I just also encourage you find some professionals around you that understand Duchenne or are willing to learn a lot about it, so that you don't waste time. Because I think that's so important, because as Dawn said, the Duchenne brain is a different brain, and you want somebody who's at least willing to be on board with all the aspects of the disease, a holistic approach, even in the mental health part of it and emotional health. Well, thank you, Dawn and Ben, for sharing. This has been so helpful. I think just some practical ways that we can kind of lower anxiety while we're in this situation and beyond. And I would just encourage those of you watching, there are a lot of resources on the PPMD site about anxiety and mental and emotional health and behavior challenges and things like that. So please check those out. And of course, reach out to PPMD. That's what they're here for if you're struggling in those areas. I want to remind you once again about our Duchenne Daily 20 that has been going on. And we will have on Friday the finale of Duchenne Daily 20. It's going to be a really fun finale at 3:30 on social media. So, in this time, it's not a surprise that all nonprofits are going to be struggling with the economy and all of that. But I just want to encourage you, keep supporting PPMD. They have done so much for this community, and they've moved research so far forward, and we need to they've been there for us, and we need to be there for them in this time. So please join the Duchenne Daily 20, and definitely join the finale at 3:30 on Friday. Thank you so much for joining us today for Family Fridays, and we will see you again. Goodbye.